Welcome to this workshop on outsmarting overwhelm. My name is Renae Shaw and I'm Head of People at Search Laboratory. I'm really passionate about helping people be their best at work, and there's no better time to share our top tips to outsmart overwhelm than in December, when there's even more to pack in than usual. So if you're struggling with the volume of festive demands, or if you've experienced overwhelm at any time in your career, and let's face it, we all have, then we have tangible actions you can take to regain control. We really would like to wish our valued clients a happy Christmas and a calm 2023. So in this session, we're going to be talking about how to outsmart overwhelm. And to do that, we need to understand exactly what overwhelm is. We need to understand the impact overwhelm has on us. And then I have 7 steps that you can follow and refer back to climb out of overwhelm. And just in the same way, unfortunately, we can't get fit from going to the gym once. We won't be able to outsmart overwhelm by just listening to a few tips. So for this to really make a difference, these tools and techniques will need to be practiced and fine-tuned until they become habit. I'm not saying it's easy, but the rewards are huge if we can find a way of working that really works for us. So let's start off then talking about what overwhelm actually is. So life has a habit of throwing several things at us at once. For lots of people, Christmas can be an incredibly busy time, and it's not like all of the other daily stresses are put on pause either. Your computer crashes, the Wi-Fi is not working, you're up against the deadline, and your tasks are multiplying like rabbits. And with the kind of busy days and multiple roles that all of us are pulling off, it's really no wonder that things can feel overwhelming. But what is overwhelm? So if we have a look at a definition of overwhelm, overwhelm describes when something or someone is buried or drowned beneath a mass of something, or it's when something has a strong emotional effect on us. It's that time when somewhere in your head you're shouting, I feel so overwhelmed. And to understand exactly what overwhelm is, we need to understand a little bit about the brain. So the amygdala, which is a cluster of almond-shaped cells located near the base of the brain, is responsible for regulating emotions such as fear and aggression. So when we are overloaded with things to do, this leads to an overload of information for the amygdala. So the amygdala, which is there to sense threat, is hijacked, and it sends an immediate and urgent signal in the form of an overwhelming emotional response. And this is what leads us to think, I'm feeling so overwhelmed. You know, this emotional response is often actually out of kilter with the reality of the situation and the size of the threat or the stimulus. At its simplest, overwhelm means having too much to do, which triggers a strong emotional reaction in the brain. And this is often also referred to as emotional flooding. It's that kind of tsunami of emotion. It leaves you being able to not think straight in the moment. Here's quite a useful visual as well when we think about overwhelm. So in life, there'll be plenty of times when you are in your comfort zone. So this is when you are totally at ease with what you're doing. You can do it with your eyes shut. And it's really important to spend time in your comfort zone. This is a place of peace and rest and ease. But actually, if we stay here for too long, we get quite bored and we get frustrated. The stretch zone is where we need to put our foot on the gas, and we have to have our wits about us. So we're adequately mobilized and stretched, and experiencing short-term stress can actually help us to get stuff done. So the stretch zone is a place where we're learning new things, and because we're relying on untested skills and strengths, it can feel a bit uncomfortable, and we can have feelings of self-doubt. Sometimes when we're in the stretch zone, we forget that discomfort is a natural part of the learning process. Just think back to any of you who learned how to drive and how uncomfortable that is initially. And sometimes we have an expectation that we should feel good and confident about everything, but that's not how things work. You know, if the goal is stretching, there should be tension and it should feel uncomfortable. If you've never stood up and presented in front of a room of people, you're going to feel stretched, and this is perfectly natural and normal. Some people take this feeling as a sign that they're not good enough, they give up and they retreat back into the comfort zone. Where we run into difficulties, though, is if the situation is too stretching. So this is when we can find ourselves in panic zone. So this could be presenting to 500 people when you've never spoken in public before, or preparing Christmas dinner for the whole family when you're not a confident cook. So this is when the challenge ahead is so uncomfortable, we feel overwhelmed and consumed by fear, even when the threat isn't as bad as we and our internal fight or flight response system perceives it to be. I think just noticing when you are in panic and overwhelm is a really important step in being able to do something about it. And with so many daily stresses and pressures, it is inevitable we will get there from time to time. But the 7 steps that I'll share with you today will help you to find your way back to stretch and comfort. So I'd really actually encourage you to just pause the video for a moment and just take a moment to think about some of the activities you've done this week, you know, whether that's been meetings, client calls, working on a new project. And just have a think about whether you were in comfort, stretch, or panic. Okay, so we've talked about how overwhelm is a completely natural and normal defense mechanism. But what do you actually do when you are flooded with feelings of overwhelm? So the first step, and this is really important, is just to pause. So stop everything for a moment, lift up your head, step out of the space or situation that you're in, if you can, to really get some fresh air or some perspective, and look at what's actually happening. Because actually just noticing and acknowledging that you're in overwhelm is the first step to climbing your way out of it. And another thing, when you're sort of taking that moment to really pause and reflect, it's important to remember that when you are emotionally flooded, the situation can feel far more dire than it actually is. And it's important to recognize that you are not how you feel. So, for example, if I say, I'm inadequate, I'm going to feel inadequate, but it doesn't mean that I am. So the language that we use, it's really, really important, because that internal language will create pathways in our brain that shapes how we experience the world. So you might feel like you're drowning, but if we say to ourselves, oh, I'm drowning, I'm so overwhelmed, it actually doesn't help the situation. You'll get a different response from your brain if you think something more positive. Now, of course, I'm not saying, you know, if you're absolutely drowning this December, you've got absolutely loads to do, you're not going to be saying, yay, isn't life amazing, this is brilliant. But label the overwhelm of emotions for what it is. So it could be something like, I have a lot to do and I need to take a step back. Or it could be something like, things feel tough right now, but I haven't felt overwhelmed forever. And this emotion will pass, just as I know that other emotions in my life have passed. What we think affects how we feel, and it actually affects our whole physiology. So match the inner language to how you want to feel on the outside. And when overwhelm rises up, there might be a little voice that tells us you need to toughen up, you need to just get on with it. So these are some of the things that we might say to ourselves. So we're trying to fight it, stop it, stifle it. Sometimes, you know, that might be with food, it could be alcohol, could be drugs, but actually ignoring and holding feelings back isn't helpful. Instead, what we should be trying to do is get closer to the overwhelm. So what we need to do is actually see that emotions are useful data and information. So that overwhelm is a signal, it's a message, and we really need to listen to it. So in those moments of overwhelm, really tune in. What am I feeling? And why am I feeling this? As we've said, emotions are data, they're information, and they're there for a reason. They're there to tell us what to do and what we need. So really connecting with the emotion, we can find out what it needs in order to pass through. And this is where many of us actually struggle quite a lot, because I think, you know, most of us can really easily recognize the 5 basic human emotions that you can see on the screen at the moment, but we haven't necessarily developed our emotional literacy beyond this. So when we say to ourselves, I'm so overwhelmed, this is such a general statement. It doesn't acknowledge what actually might be uniquely going on for us at that time. So for example, there's a whole other another words on the screen that could be more accurately describing what's going on for us when we feel overwhelmed. You know, perhaps we've got a presentation and we're worried that it won't be good enough, or perhaps we feel inadequate because someone in the meeting knew all the answers and we didn't. So some of the thoughts that lead to this emotion, this feeling of overwhelm will be rational, and some will be irrational. And identifying the thoughts that are leading to the feeling of overwhelm is really going to help us to unravel that. So rather than this blanket response of I feel so overwhelmed, if we acknowledge really what's going on, we can then do something about it. So be friends with your emotions. I know that might sound a bit strange, but don't see them as the enemy, and ask, what am I feeling and what do I need to do about it? For many people experiencing overwhelm, they just try to knuckle down, push on. I'm going to work longer hours. I'm going to just get through it. But emotions aren't designed to get stuck. They are designed to be acknowledged and processed, which is why talking therapies are so effective. So the more we listen and learn from our emotions, the more they will dissolve, leaving us feeling less overwhelmed. So again, I would really encourage you to pause the video for a moment to work on this activity. What I would like you to do is to have a think about a handful of situations when you have felt overwhelmed, and to identify the more specific emotion you were feeling. So what was the emotion beneath the overwhelm? And then finally, once you have this data, what could you have done differently in those situations? So this is a really useful activity to do. And the idea is that you can look for common patterns or themes. And maybe when you notice that you're in overwhelm in the future, you'll be able to refer back to this knowledge and perhaps be able to do something differently. When overwhelmed, we often have so many different things running around our minds. It feels impossible to untangle any of it. Writing everything down is really powerful, though, to stop everything spinning out of control, whether it's 3 a.m. or 4 p.m. Get the overwhelm out of your head. To write it all down is to externalize it. And when the overwhelm becomes visible, feelings subside and overwhelm starts to drain away. The bad news about to-do lists is that they don't always get done. There's often too much choice, too many big complex tasks, and when there are so many different priorities all in the same list, it can make it difficult to sort them and make sense of it. I've recently discovered a great tool for visualizing my to-do list. Everything is out of my head and into a system I can trust. I'm not wasting energy worrying about if I've remembered everything, and I can much more easily pick out my priority actions for the day. So some of you may already be familiar with Kanban boards. So Kanban is a Japanese word for signboard, and the concept originated in lean manufacturing, but it's a really, really simple system where there's essentially 3 buckets of work: the things that you need to start, that you need to do, the things that you're already doing, and the things that you've completed. And there are absolutely loads of free Kanban boards that you can use online. So the real advantage here is that you can really easily and visually progress actions from through your to-do list, and you can use a Kanban board to break those large projects down into smaller tasks, look at the list and pick the priority actions for the day, and then feel really, really good about moving them into the done bucket. So it's a really great way of externalizing your to-do list. So now that you've externalized your workload, you need to analyze it. You need to understand exactly what you're carrying and why. So if you imagine all of us have a load that we carry, like a delivery driver transporting a load, and we need to understand what we're carrying, why we're carrying it, and whether it's really paying its way or if it's freeloading a ride. So there are many things that we add to our load that other people haven't asked us to do. They didn't expect us to do it, and they wouldn't even notice if we didn't do it at all. So our expectations of ourselves load onto an already overloaded truck. You know, will it be good enough? What will they think? They'll think I'm not good enough if I don't do this. Perfectionism, all of these things drive us to have unrealistic expectations of ourselves. And we might think that people need things in a certain way, but often it's not accurate or true. So really looking at your to-do list and thinking about, what have I added to my load that doesn't need to be there? Does it really need to be that detailed or that good? Ask yourself, do I need to be doing this at all? Maybe the moment has passed and it's no longer needed. So as well as the load from self, there's the load from others. So this is things on your to-do list that are from your manager, your team. And we just have to realize that there is only so much space in the truck, and we won't be able to move at all if it's overloaded. So if you look down your to-do list and your heart starts racing, it's because you've had the brutal realization that there's absolutely no way that you're going to be able to do everything on the list, and you're in overwhelm. Put simply, you've overpromised. And I know it can be hard to push back and to say no and to set those boundaries. But once you've externalized your workload, perhaps using a Kanban board, really look at it with a critical eye. Because if you're looking and you're thinking, there's no way that I can get this done, it needs to have a trim. You need some help, or things need to be delayed. In an effort to get things done, we can pick up lots of different things in the day, and this workload is our work in progress. And if you keep taking on more and more balls, of course, people will keep giving them to you because they think, look how good at juggling this person is. But overwhelm happens when we don't know how many balls we have in the air, so we end up dropping them. We think we can juggle lots of different things at the same time, but multitasking is a myth. Just look at how many people think they can text and drive to know how true that is. When our time and energy is split across multiple tasks, our attention isn't split evenly. It ends up being much lower than that. Our energy reserves are drained, we lose momentum, and it can take us much longer to get back into a task. Multitaskers not only take 50% longer to complete a task, but they make up to 50% more errors. And multitasking causes a 10% drop in IQ. It literally affects your brain and reduces your cognitive ability. So keep the number of balls you have in the air at one time to just 3, and move things on your Kanban board onto your to-do list today. Again, if you're looking at your list and thinking that everything needs doing, then something has gone wrong. We've either overpromised, we've said yes when we should have said no, we need to delegate, or we need more resource. When we have back-to-back meetings and absolutely no gaps in our schedule, should we really be surprised if we feel overwhelmed? So we really need to make sure that there is slack in the plan and there are breaks as well, and blocking out time to actually get work done. So blocking out time is a really good thing, but sometimes when we block out big chunks of time in our diaries to work on a handful of different tasks, it's not always the most helpful approach, because the danger of as long as it takes, where specific tasks don't have a time limit, is that the work will expand into the time that's available. This is where time blocking combined with a technique called Pomodoro is really, really useful. So Pomodoro is a time management method, which is based on 25-minute stretches of focus work, broken down with a 5-minute break in between. So a Pomodoro is 25 minutes because it's the perfect length of time to help you not procrastinate, to be productive, to create urgency, and to help you stay focused on the task that you're tackling. And each Pomodoro is dedicated to one task, and then there's a break so that you have that chance to reset. So you're really retraining your brain to focus and not get pulled into lots of different tasks. The reason that it's called a Pomodoro technique is because a university student used a tomato timer to measure his 25-minute sessions, and a Pomodoro is Italian for tomato. Downtime is really important for everybody, so please do plan some downtime for yourself. Get enough sleep, drink enough water, eat good food. These things seem so simple, I know, but I always seem to forget how important they are. Go outside, breathe some fresh air. All of these things will rejuvenate and replenish you and set you up for success for the day. Now, I know that you might be thinking, That's ridiculous. I mean, I have so much to do. I don't have time to be going for a walk or listening to music or having a break, but it really is so important, or it might be too late and you might reach burnout. So please be kind to yourself. And being kind to yourself also means speaking up and asking for help. So as we've mentioned earlier, if you've analysed your workload and you've looked at all the things that you have to do and it's just too much, you need to speak to your manager to reduce your load. So to finish, a very quick recap on the 7 steps to outsmart and step out of overwhelm. So number 1, pause. Stop everything to notice and acknowledge when you're in overwhelm. Really tune in to notice and listen to your emotions so that we can rethink them, rather than just saying, oh, I'm so overwhelmed. Say it for what it is. What is going on and what do you need to do about it? Next step is to externalize the load. So stop it spinning and multiplying, but getting it out of your head and having it in front of your eyes. Break big tasks down so that you have clear, manageable actions that can be slotted into your diary. Writing it all down gets the overwhelm out of your head so that you have the perspective and brain energy to then analyze that load. So how much of your load do you really need to transport, and how much of it are you adding on yourself? Identify the value of your key tasks, understand why you are doing what you're doing, be clear about value and results, and prioritize the things that are worth prioritizing. Next step is to stop juggling so many balls. So our brains are not designed to multitask. If you keep picking up and dropping the same task, you'll never feel like you're moving forward. Reduce your work in progress and avoid that stop-start. You need time to actually do the work, so block focus time in slots of 25 or 90 minutes at best, with a break in between. Build your resilience up by being kind to yourself. Burn off stress hormones with exercise and do the things that recharge your battery, and do also speak up if you need help. So what you'll see there is there's really no silver bullet for fixing overwhelm, but find a system that works for you. And if anyone would like more personalized one-to-one and confidential support, do speak to your manager. Thank you so much for listening, and I really wish you a very happy Christmas and a wonderful new year.